The story begins in Pease High School, a school attended only by vampires. At first glance, it is no different from a normal school. Only there shouldn't be many people there because it is a dangerous place for them, as vampires want to drink their blood. We learned that recently a man who was trapped in a lair of vampires started causing some trouble, causing one of the students to lash out at him for ruining other people's lunch and nearly beat him up. However, it didn't end as badly as it could have. The famous vampire queen Han suddenly appeared in front of them and ordered them to leave. They ran away in fear without waiting for a second order. The delighted crowd began to discuss what had happened, mentioning that the girl was a vampire of another level. She was a pure-blood vampire with white hair and red eyes. The girl, noticing that the vampire queen was leaving, called out to her and embarrassedly handed her her blood bag, reminding her that she hadn't gotten her own. But she gave her a stern look and knocked the bag out of her hands, saying haughtily that she wasn't going to drink any fake blood. Finally, the mysterious girl left, and the people already piled behind her began to discuss that she had never drunk blood from a bag, and rumor had it that she was hunting humans, even though it was illegal to drink human blood and an exorcist couldn't allow her to do such a thing. The heroine, locked in the toilet, started waving her hand frantically. She was hysterical because she was called the Queen of Vampires. The girl could not understand why she deserved such a nickname and why they were afraid of her if they themselves are scarier than she, an ordinary person. After calming down, the heroine drank blood from the bag and thought again about talking to herself in the restroom every day. We learn that she was the only person who attended Paxi High School. Previously, humans had not gotten into the vampire school. The main character, who was very concerned about what was happening, was told over the phone that she had been mistakenly enrolled in a school for vampires rather than humans when applying, as they had similar names. But the girl operator could not help her, as this situation was also new to her, and said only that she could transfer to another school after a year of study. After the strange conversation, the heroine ran to her parents to share the unpleasant news with them. But instead of them, she found only a note saying that they were going on a trip for a few days and congratulating her on her entrance to high school. The protagonist is horrified to realize that everyone, mom, dad, teacher, have all bailed on her, leaving her alone, and she already has an admissions ceremony tomorrow, so there's nothing she can do. After realizing that she had only one way left, the heroine decided to make her hair white with red eyes to be as much like a vampire as possible. But she ended up regretting it because she never thought she would stand out so much among vampires. Girl clenched her hand into a fist and exclaimed that she would transfer to another school in a year, and then those horrible bathroom lunches and vampire disguises would end. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a guy who had been eavesdropping on her conversation with herself the whole time. He looked at her indifferently and grinned, saying that he hadn't realized that the pure-blood vampire everyone was talking about was actually human. The heroine, frozen and pale with horror, mumbled that he had made a mistake, but he didn't believe her. Kneeling in front of the guy and barely holding back her tears, she told him that she had gotten here by mistake and had been interrogated by an exorcist. All she could think about was that she didn't want to die like this. As she thought about her imminent death, she disappointedly remarked that she had quit sports and only entered high school. She hadn't even been able to enjoy the high school life she had always dreamed of. The heroine, not wanting to die because she fought so much to survive in the school, decided to use the main method which never failed her, and kneeling down, began to beg the vampire not to tell the others about it.
The guy, hearing that the victim was willing to do whatever it took to make sure no one found out, smiled. Grabbing her chin and lifting her face toward him, he stated that he was just what he needed, someone like her. The heroine realized she'd said it for nothing. She'd immediately guessed that the vampire had been up to it from the start. Deciding to get out of the situation, she embarrassedly said she didn't even know how someone like her could help. The guy, who was not affected by such manipulation, smirked and said that he would definitely need her, and anyway, she had no choice. Thinking that he was going to kill her, the vampire queen coughed hysterically. The guy, frightened for her, looked worriedly at the heroine and asked what was wrong. To which she, covering her mouth with her hands, replied that she had a chronic illness and asked to escort her to the medical center. But he did not believe in this silly legend, ordering her to stop pretending. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of him with a flash that temporarily blinded him. Leaving the guy in confusion, the protagonist did not waste time and rushed with all her legs to the nearest office to find the teacher and ask for help. However, accidentally running into the dining room, she saw the vampires who recognized her and asked what brought her here. Noticing that everyone was eating, the heroine put a smile on her face and said she would come back later, wishing the eaters a pleasant appetite. As she closed the door, the girl worriedly remembered that the teachers here were also vampires, since this was a vampire school. Walking down the hallway, the girl wondered how she was going to go to school now because she was sure that guy would tell everyone that she was human, and if it spread throughout the school, she would just be killed. Clutching her head, the heroine accidentally bumped into a student. Noticing that the latter was looking at her, she frightenedly pulled herself together and asked with hatred why he was looking at her like that. He, not expecting such a sharp reaction, was stunned and ran into the nearest office.
Left alone, the protagonist finally let out a sigh of relief. She reminded herself to stay calm. After all, she was now the vampire queen, and she couldn't let small things shake her. Her main goal was simple: survive 1 year in this school. When she entered the classroom, she quietly went to her seat. Normally, the room would go silent at her arrival, but today the students were unusually chatty. The sudden liveliness caught her off guard, but she quickly brushed off the thought and decided to keep a calm, emotionless expression. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes to focus, but when she opened them, her heart skipped. Sitting right beside her was the same guy she had blinded in the bathroom earlier. The boy smirked and teased her, saying he hadn't expected to end up as her desk mate and didn't even know the seating plan because he rarely attended class. The other students whispered nervously, realizing the notorious bully was now sitting next to the vampire queen. The girl began to sweat nervously. She had chosen the seat precisely because no one ever sat there. Without warning, the boy leaned in and said she'd better come with him after class, sending chills down her spine. Something told her this wouldn't end well. After school, he led her to a quiet, deserted spot and suddenly pinned her against the wall. His piercing gaze met hers as he asked, almost mockingly, if she really thought he wanted her blood. Startled, she blurted out that it was obvious. He had said he needed a man's blood, hadn't he? The boy exploded in anger, shouting that he'd never asked for her blood. Her awkward apology only made him angrier. He demanded more, claiming her sorry wasn't enough. She stammered that she'd do whatever he wanted this time. The boy smirked again, a dangerous glint in his eyes, and told her to follow him to the old warehouse. There, he explained, they needed to find a key hidden by the school director. Noticing that it was a very ordinary building, the girl couldn't help but wonder why he couldn't go there himself. The guy, annoyed that she had entered the school without knowing anything, explained that the director used to be a vampire hunter. That's why the building wasn't easy to access. It was filled with deadly traps and sealed by a powerful barrier. And to make matters worse, the warehouse was guarded by an ancient demon. Upon hearing all that, "What? You didn't say I'd have to go to such a dangerous place. If I'd known, I never would have come." The guy cut her off sharply. "This time, I'm not letting you run away. Don't worry, we'll just grab the key and get out. Nothing to worry about. This is an exorcist's warehouse. There are traps everywhere." She almost stepped on something shiny. Looking closer, she realized it was garlic scattered all over the floor. "Seriously? Garlic!" she muttered, taking a cautious step. But her foot slipped, and suddenly a massive pumpkin hanging from the ceiling swung down, triggering a trap. A shower of garlic heads rained down on them. When it finally ended, the girl looked around in disbelief. "It's just garlic. I was scared for nothing," she sighed, pinching her nose at the awful smell. Then she turned to check on her companion, only to find him slumped against her shoulder. "Hey, are you asleep?" she asked, panicking. But a deep voice, right by her ear, answered. "Do I look asleep to you?" She froze, her face flushing bright red. Was he about to bite her? Her heart pounded in her chest.
But before anything could happen, the vampire suddenly sneezed, his form shimmering before turning into a small, indignant bat. "Get rid of that garlic," he squeaked. "Vampires are allergic to it." We see a snippet of a television show and learn that when a vampire touches garlic, it becomes a bat, similar to the way a human sneezes and becomes like a monkey. However, vampires who have turned into a bat must be careful because when they turn, it becomes truly cute. Finally, the guy in the bat's body barely reached the girl, who had not reacted to him before, and warned that it was dangerous in any case because he would not be able to find the key in this body. But he did not realize that the most dangerous one here was his companion, who immediately wanted to touch the small animal. Ever since she was a little girl, the heroine couldn't keep her cool when it came to animals. When she saw something cute, her hands would start shaking, and she couldn't control herself, and she would end up walking up to the animal. She was trying to stay sober now, convincing herself that she knew there was actually an evil vampire inside that cute little bat. But she couldn't help herself and still touched it, noticing that it felt like microfiber. The guy, who hadn't expected this, exclaimed indignantly, but the protagonist had already nuzzled him, noting that he was softer than her stray cats from the neighborhood. He didn't get to the girl, he bit her finger, not wanting to take it anymore, and then he immediately turned into a man. Now he held her finger in his mouth, but immediately embarrassed, he stood up and said that he told her not to touch him. Having removed all the garlic, the heroine again asked if there were really traps and a demon here, for so far she had only seen a garlic pumpkin. And the guy drew her attention to a terrifying cross covered with skulls. Seeing which, the girl screamed with horror. Ignoring his new acquaintance's reaction, the vampire informed her that he couldn't touch the intimidating object because crosses were an Achilles heel for vampires. So, she just needed to put her hand in its mouth and answer the ancient riddle he would ask in order for the mysterious room to open. Anxiously asked what would happen if she did not answer. The interlocutor suggested with perfect indifference that then the skeleton whose hand was reaching for the cross would bite her forever. The girl did not appreciate the joke of the interlocutor and asked how she could answer the skeleton's question. The guy, without answering anything, pointed to the phone, hinting that her question was too stupid. The confused girl still decided to use the gadget, but her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the skeleton, who asked the uninvited guests if they really believed that they could use the phone, and then bit the girl's hand, which scared her very much. But the skeleton hurriedly apologized, said that there was no law that forbade a skeleton to speak. He noticed that the girl looked very weak to come to such a place. Guessing that her boyfriend had asked her to come here, the talking skeleton stated that the boy was real trash, winked at the vampire queen and suggested that she should ditch her boyfriend and pay attention to him, adding that he used to be very popular. The heroine, who didn't want to get into trouble, apologized and said she could only see a skull here, much to the laughter of the attendant standing behind her and infuriating the skeleton. He declared that she couldn't answer his question correctly anyway, so they would be with her forever until she rotted away completely. Asked a question that sounded like this: conversation between John and Anna and tell me what their relationship is. Hearing the task, the visitors fell into a stupor, and their interlocutor turned on the tape. During the conversation, Anna congratulated John on Thanksgiving, and he admitted that yesterday his heart fluttered when he saw her, so he thought he liked her. However, the girl said that it was an illusion and they were just friends, besides she did not love him. After which, the interlocutor exclaimed that they should just drop everything and run away to heaven. That was the end of the recording, and the skull hurried the girl to give her answer. But the whole time Anna and John's conversation was in English, so the guests didn't understand anything. Realizing there was no choice, the vampire and the girl decided to discuss it. As a result, they came to the conclusion that the characters were a doctor and a patient, because the only thing they realized was that someone's heart was pounding during the conversation, and the skeleton smirked and informed her that it was wrong. The correct answer was forbidden love, congratulated the mistaken one on the fact that she would now stay here forever. Protagonist, who already had tears showing on her face, cussed out, and the guy ordered her to try and stick her fingers out. Deciding to try, she tore her hand away, and the skull exclaimed that it was like she was out of a shonen manga, but she still wouldn't be able to get away from him. Finally, the girl, who was not going to give up and was pulling as hard as she could, was able to lift her arm, but was perplexed to find that the skull was still clinging to it. An alarm then went off. It was announced that the piece had been lost. The heroes immediately pounced on the skull, asking why the alarm had suddenly sounded and begging for something to be done, as a terrifying scream suddenly sounded. After a while, the heroine opened her eyes and saw before her the very skull that had separated from her during the fall, and now laughed at the fact that she was so surprised that she could not utter a word. She, not intending to tolerate ridicule, hit her interlocutor with all her might, shouting that she was very frightened, grabbed the victim and asked if he was okay, then explained that she was very scared and didn't notice how she hit him, said with a crack that he was okay because he was already dead, and asked how she was doing. Very lucky that there was a mat on the floor, and thanks to it she was not hurt. After a moment, she remembered her lost acquaintance and asked her interlocutor where he was, to which he replied that she seemed to have crushed him. Only now noticing that she was sitting on a vampire, the heroine worriedly rushed to get up. The latter, also getting up, irritably asked why something was always happening to her, and reminded her that they both had almost died. It wasn't all her fault this time, as he was the one who gave the wrong answer and told her to pull her arm out. To which the guy, with his previous irritation, said she shouldn't have listened to him, as it was obvious she didn't have the strength. The skull, who had been watching their argument all this time, ordered them to stop quarreling and called them doves. But they, hearing what he had called them, exclaimed with one voice that they were not doves at all. Skull told them not to pretend and reported that he saw the boy cover his gray-haired friend with his body so she wouldn't fall. Noticing the girl's indignation, he observantly assumed that they had unrequited love and relented. But the vampire grabbed him and threatened that he was about to wipe him into powder. The heroine was thinking about those words at the time. She couldn't believe he was actually a good vampire, despite the fact that he'd saved her. Noticing her staring at him, he admitted that he'd actually saved her because she was the only one he could use as a source of sustenance in an emergency. The girl, who had only hoped that they could be friends, after saying that, disappointedly lowered her head, realizing that he needed her blood after all. And he reminded her that they had come here for the key. Along the way, the heroine froze and screamed. She saw a scary picture. However, the guy shut her up, saying she was in the way of his search, and ended up leaving her alone with the skull because she was only in the way. Realizing that she was also scared to be alone, she froze. Skull, who had been in her arms the whole time, remembered that his younger sister had once had a hard time with a man too, and offered to put her companion in her place. The girl did not immediately understand what we are talking about, so the interlocutor clarified that he constantly points her out, and it's time to change. The heroine was interested in such a proposal, but the skull was not going to help her just like that, and reported that in return she must promise him that he will allow her to live with her in the same house. Hanya Sol exclaimed in surprise, and the poor skull told her that if the principal found out that he hadn't stopped them, he could use him in his lab as a mannequin head. The girl was touched by his story, but she said she didn't live alone, so after weighing the pros and cons, she let the skeleton head stay with her, but not for long. Overjoyed, her new roommate explained to her that the guy went to get the key and they could use that to their advantage. She could keep him in a dog collar. Upon hearing such a suggestion, Hanya Sol thought the skull was mocking her by asking who takes a dog collar with them. The skull was confused but explained that it wasn't a normal collar, but the one used to tame demons. He explained that he knew where the key was hidden anyway, so they should just get it before Changyal did and get out of here. Hanya Sol did not answer, but the interlocutor took her silence for assent and pointed to a funny portrait on the wall, telling her to poke it directly in the eye. She obeyed, and thereupon the wall on which the picture hung moved away and a passage opened. Hanya Sol exclaimed in delighted amazement, and the skull informed her that there were many things to find in the vampire's castle, and confirmed that it was indeed a real castle, but was now being used by the headmaster. Upon entering the room that opened, Hanya Sol involuntarily apologized for the intrusion. The skull, noticing a box that said demon collar inside, upon opening it, imagined that inside was the very key that Changyal wanted to take away. However, it was empty. The skull, who couldn't believe his eyes, said it was all the principal's fault that he bought a bunch of inventory and forgot what was in that box, so he just shoved all the inventory in it. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the voice of the lad who was looking everywhere for the girl. Hanya Sol now very quickly began to go over everything in the box at the skull's bidding, and after carefully examining all the boxes, found the key, which was held in the paws of a Pomeranian Spitz. Upon seeing the doggy, Hanya Sol couldn't help herself and squealed with delight. But the accompanying skeleton part exclaimed for her to move away from him, as this was no ordinary beast and it was dangerous. But Hanya Sol, who could no longer control herself, laughed and asked what could be the danger of this baby. To which the skull frightenedly replied that it was the owner of this collar, the demon guarding this place, and his name was Big Pum. For next chapter please like and subscribe my channel.